The Miami heat was suffocating that Saturday evening in July, but nothing could have prepared me for the chill that would run down my spine just hours later. Mom's 65th birthday party was supposed to be a celebration of life, love, and family. Instead, it became the stage for the most humiliating moment of my marriage. I stood in the kitchen of Mom's Coral Gables home, arranging the tres leches cake I'd picked up from her favorite Cuban bakery on Calle Ocho. The familiar sounds of salsa music drifted from the backyard where 30 of our closest family and friends had gathered. Palm trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, and the scent of gardenias from Mom's prized garden mixed with the aroma of the lechon my cousin Miguel was preparing on the grill. "Mija, you look tired," Mom said, appearing beside me with that knowing look she'd perfected over the years. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she wore the turquoise dress I'd given her for Mother's Day. "Everything okay with you and David?" I forced a smile, the same one I'd been wearing like a mask for the past 6 months. "Everything's fine, Mommy. Just work stress, you know how it is." But it wasn't fine. Nothing had been fine since David lost his job at the investment firm 3 months ago. The man who once charmed everyone at parties with his quick wit and confident smile had become a stranger who spent his days on the couch, scrolling through his phone and snapping at me for the smallest things. "Where is he anyway?" Mom asked, glancing toward the sliding glass door that led to the patio. "He's around," I said, though I hadn't seen him in 20 minutes. He'd been acting strange all evening, more distant than usual, checking his phone constantly and avoiding eye contact with everyone, including me. Through the kitchen window, I could see my aunts clustered around the outdoor bar, their animated conversation punctuated by bursts of laughter. My teenage nephew was teaching some of the younger cousins how to play dominoes, while the older men discussed baseball and politics in rapid-fire Spanish. It was exactly the kind of warm, chaotic family gathering that had defined my childhood. "There's my beautiful wife." David's voice cut through the evening air with an enthusiasm that made my stomach clench. He was standing on the patio now, holding a beer and wearing that forced smile I'd come to dread. His sandy hair was disheveled, and there were sweat stains on his blue button-down shirt despite the outdoor fans. "What is he doing?" Mom muttered under her breath, but her words were lost as David raised his bottle higher. "Hey everyone, can I get your attention for a minute?" The conversations gradually died down. Faces turned toward him with polite curiosity, some smiling in anticipation of what they assumed would be a toast to the birthday girl. My heart began to race, and I found myself gripping the kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "I just wanted to share some news with all of you wonderful people," David continued, his voice carrying that artificial cheerfulness that had become his default setting. "You've been like family to me these past 5 years, and I think you deserve to know." I started moving toward the door, panic rising in my chest. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Not at my mother's party. "David, don't," I began, but he was already speaking again. "Elena and I are getting divorced." The words hung in the humid Miami air like a physical presence. Someone's beer bottle clinked against the concrete patio. The salsa music continued playing, but it seemed hollow now, almost mocking. I could feel 30 pairs of eyes shifting between David and me, confusion and shock painted across their faces. "Isn't that great?" David laughed, but there was something manic in it. "Finally free. Both of us." That's when I heard it, the sound that would replay in my mind for weeks to come. It started as a small chuckle, barely audible over the music. But then it grew louder, more confident. Mom was laughing. Not the polite, uncomfortable laugh you might expect in such a situation. This was genuine, relieved laughter that seemed to come from deep in her chest. And then, as if she couldn't help herself, she said the words that would change everything. Finally, the smile vanished from David's face instantly. His eyes widened, and for a moment he looked like a child who'd just been slapped. The beer bottle slipped from his hand, shattering against the patio tiles. "What did you say?" His voice was barely a whisper, but in the sudden silence, everyone heard it. Mom straightened her shoulders, and I recognized the look in her eyes, the same steel I'd seen when she'd worked 3 jobs to put me through college, when she'd stood up to the bank threatening to foreclose on our house, when she'd fought for everything that mattered. "I said finally," she repeated, her voice steady and clear. "Finally, my daughter can stop pretending to be happy." That's when David started screaming. "How dare you!" David's voice cracked like a whip across the patio. His face had gone from pale to deep red in seconds, and the vein in his forehead that only appeared when he was truly angry was now pulsing visibly. "How dare you!" The entire party froze. Miguel turned off the grill. My cousin Sophia grabbed her toddler and pulled him closer. Even the music seemed to fade into the background as David's rage filled the space. "David, please," I said, finally finding my voice as I stepped onto the patio. "Let's just go home and—" "No." He spun around to face me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not just anger, but genuine hatred. "Your mother thinks she knows everything, doesn't she? Well, let me tell you what I think about your precious family." My Uncle Roberto, a man who'd worked construction for 40 years and still commanded respect in every room he entered, stood up from his chair. "Son, I think you need to calm down." "Don't call me son." David whirled around again, his movements becoming more erratic. "None of you ever accepted me. None of you ever thought I was good enough for your little princess." The words stung because there was a grain of truth in them. My family had been polite to David, but never warm. Not in the way they were with Sophia's husband Carlos, who'd learned Spanish and coached Little League with my cousin's kids, or with my aunt's boyfriend who brought homemade pastels to every gathering. But as I watched David's face contort with rage, I realized that maybe my family's instincts had been right all along. "You think you're so much better than me," he continued, pointing an accusing finger at Mom. "With your perfect little house and your perfect little daughter and your perfect little parties." "David, stop." My voice was firmer now, anger beginning to replace the embarrassment. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" He laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "I'm making a scene? Your mother just publicly humiliated me in front of everyone." "She said one word," I shot back. "One word, and you're acting like—" "Like what? Like a man who's tired of being treated like dirt by his wife's family? Like someone who's sick of being looked down on?" The accusations kept coming, each one more painful than the last. He told everyone about our fights, our money problems, intimate details about our marriage that should have stayed private. He ranted about how I'd never supported his career, how I'd always put my family first, how I'd never really loved him. And through it all, Mom stood there, her arms crossed, watching him with the calm patience of someone who'd seen this tantrum coming for months. "Are you finished?" she asked when he finally paused to catch his breath. "Finished." David's voice climbed another octave. "Lady, I haven't even started." That's when my cousin Miguel stepped forward. At 6'2", with the build of someone who'd played college football, he was an intimidating presence. "I think you have," he said quietly. "I think you need to leave now." "You can't make me leave." "Actually, I can." Miguel's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "This is a private party on private property, and you're not welcome anymore." David looked around desperately, as if searching for an ally in the crowd. But every face he saw reflected the same thing: disappointment, embarrassment, and a growing anger at his behavior. "Fine," he screamed. "Fine. You want to know what I really think? This whole family is a joke. A bunch of—" "David." My voice cut through his tirade with a sharpness that surprised even me. "Get out. Now." He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something else: hurt, maybe, or the dawning realization of what he'd just done. Elena, Get out. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then seemed to think better of it. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked like the man I'd married, vulnerable, lost, almost childlike. "This isn't over," he said quietly, but the fight had gone out of him. "Yes, it is," I replied, and I meant it. We all watched as he walked through the house and out the front door. A few minutes later, we heard his car start and pull away. The sound of his engine fading into the Miami night felt like the final punctuation mark on our marriage. The silence that followed was deafening. 30 people stood frozen on the patio, unsure of what to do or say. Someone's phone buzzed. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance. The normal sounds of a Saturday evening in Coral Gables, but nothing felt normal anymore. Mom was the first to move. She walked over to where David's beer bottle had shattered and began picking up the pieces. "Mommy, don't," I said, kneeling beside her. "I'll clean it up." "We'll clean it up together," she said, and something in her voice made me look up at her face. She was crying, not the dramatic tears of someone seeking attention, but the quiet tears of a mother who'd watched her daughter suffer and finally seen her freed. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry he ruined your party." She cupped my face in her hands, her palms warm against my cheeks. "Mija, he didn't ruin anything. He showed everyone who he really was. And you showed everyone who you really are." Slowly, the other guests began to move again. Miguel turned the music back on. Sophia's husband started a new conversation about the Miami heat. My aunts began clearing dishes, the way they did after every family gathering. Life, it seemed, was determined to go on. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. Not just in my marriage, that had been over for months, maybe years. Something had changed in me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The house felt different when I returned that night. Not physically, the same cream-colored walls, the same modern furniture David had insisted on buying, the same view of Biscayne Bay from our 20th floor condo. But the energy had shifted. The oppressive weight that had been pressing down on me for months was gone, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. I kicked off my heels and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the water. The Miami skyline glittered in the darkness, and I could see the lights of boats moving slowly across the bay. It was beautiful, but it had never felt like home. David had chosen this place, this neighborhood, this life. I had just gone along with it. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Carmen in Orlando. "Mom told me what happened. Are you okay? Do you need me to come down?" Before I could respond, another message appeared, this one from my cousin Sophia. "Girl, I've been waiting years for someone to put him in his place. You're better off without him." Then Miguel, "If you need anything moved or if he gives you trouble, call me. I mean it." The messages kept coming, from family members, friends, even some of David's former colleagues who'd apparently heard about the scene at the party. The support was overwhelming, but it also made me realize how isolated I'd become. When had I stopped talking to these people about my real problems? When had I started pretending everything was fine? I was scrolling through the messages when I heard the key in the lock. My heart rate spiked, and I felt my body tense the way it had learned to do whenever David came home in one of his moods. "Elena." His voice was subdued, almost tentative. "Are you awake?" I didn't answer. I heard him moving around the apartment, probably looking for me. His footsteps were unsteady. He'd been drinking, probably at O'Malley's, the Irish pub near his old office where he'd been spending more and more time lately. "Elena, please. We need to talk." I found him in the kitchen, leaning against the granite counter that we'd picked out together 3 years ago when we'd thought we were building a life. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were red-rimmed from alcohol and exhaustion. "I messed up," he said without preamble. "I know I messed up." "You humiliated me in front of my entire family," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You announced our divorce at my mother's birthday party. You screamed at a 65-year-old woman who was just trying to protect her daughter. I know. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. I wasn't thinking straight. I've been so stressed, and when your mom said that word, it just felt like everyone was against me. Maybe because you've given them reasons to be. He looked up at me sharply. What's that supposed to mean? It means that for the past 6 months, you've been taking your anger out on everyone around you. It means you've been drinking too much and treating me like I'm the enemy. It means you've been so focused on your own problems that you forgot we were supposed to be a team. That's not fair, he said, but there was less conviction in his voice now. I lost my job, Elena. Do you know what that feels like? To have everything you've worked for just disappear. I felt a familiar pang of sympathy, the same one that had kept me walking on eggshells for months. But then I remembered the look on his face when he'd screamed at my mother, the venom in his voice when he'd aired our private business to everyone we cared about. I know it's hard, I said, but that doesn't give you the right to act the way you did tonight. You're right. He moved closer, and I caught the smell of whiskey on his breath. You're absolutely right. I'm going to get help, Elena. I'm going to see someone, maybe join a support group. We can work through this. No, I said, and the word came out more forcefully than I'd intended. We can't. What do you mean? I mean that tonight wasn't just about you losing your temper. Tonight was about you showing everyone who you really are when you don't get your way. And I've been seeing that person for months. His face crumpled, and for a moment I saw the vulnerability that had drawn me to him in the first place. Elena, please. I love you. I know I haven't been showing it, but I do. We can fix this. Can we? I asked. Can we fix the way you've been talking to me? Can we fix the way you've been making me feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home? Can we fix the way you've been blaming me for your problems? He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. I want you to move out, I said. Tomorrow. I'll stay at Mom's for a few days to give you time to pack. Elena. I'm done, David. I'm done pretending this is working. I'm done making excuses for you. I'm done being unhappy. The words hung between us like a bridge burning. I could see him searching for something to say, some argument that would change my mind. But we both knew it was too late. Is this really what you want? He asked finally. I thought about the question seriously, maybe for the first time in months. Was this what I wanted? The divorce, the upheaval, the uncertain future? Yes, I said, and I meant it. This is what I want. He nodded slowly, and I saw something shift in his expression. Acceptance, maybe, or resignation. Okay, he said. Okay. We stood there in the kitchen for a few more minutes, not speaking, just absorbing the finality of the moment. Then he turned and walked toward the bedroom, and I heard the shower start running. I stayed in the kitchen, looking out at the Miami skyline and thinking about the conversation I'd just had. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. But it also felt right in a way that nothing had felt right for months. My phone buzzed with another message, this one from Mom. Mija, I'm proud of you. Whatever you decide to do, I'm here for you. I smiled, maybe the first genuine smile I'd had in weeks. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and logistics and all the complicated business of untangling a life. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. And that was enough. 3 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Coconut Grove, reviewing divorce papers and trying to decide whether to contest David's request for half of our savings account. The cafe was one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and baristas who looked like they were auditioning for indie films, but it had become my sanctuary over the past few weeks. The usual? Asked Jessica, the barista who'd been serving me my cortadito every morning since I'd moved to a small apartment just a few blocks away. Please, I said, looking up from the legal documents that had become an unwelcome but necessary part of my daily routine. The apartment was nothing like the sleek high-rise condo I'd shared with David. It was small, with original hardwood floors and windows that actually opened to let in the Miami breeze. The walls were painted a warm yellow that reminded me of Mom's kitchen, and I'd hung photographs of my family everywhere. It felt like home in a way that the expensive condo never had. "Tough reading?" Jessica asked, setting down my coffee along with a pastelito that I hadn't ordered. "On the house," she said when I started to protest. "You look like you could use some sugar." I laughed, something I'd been doing more often lately. "Is it that obvious?" "Let's just say you don't get that particular wrinkle between your eyebrows from reading romance novels." It was true. The divorce process had been more complicated than I'd expected. David had initially been cooperative, apologetic even, but as the reality of our separation set in, he'd become increasingly difficult. He'd contested the division of assets, demanded spousal support, and most recently had started showing up at places where he knew I'd be. "Elena." I looked up to see a familiar face. Carlos, my cousin, Sophia's husband. He was wearing his postal service uniform and carrying a large iced coffee, clearly on his lunch break. "Hey, Carlos, what are you doing in the Grove?" "I had a delivery route change," he said, gesturing to the postal truck parked outside. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" "Of course." He settled into the chair across from me, careful to move the divorce papers out of the way. "How are you holding up?" It was a question I'd been hearing a lot lately, and I developed a standard response. "I'm fine, taking it one day at a time." But something about Carlos's genuine concern made me want to be honest. "Some days are harder than others," I admitted, "but I'm better than I was." "That's what Sophia said. She's worried about you, you know. We all are." "I know, and I appreciate it. But honestly, I'm okay. More okay than I've been in years." Carlos nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I was married before Sophia. Did you know that?" I shook my head. In all the years I'd known him, he'd never mentioned a previous marriage. It lasted about 2 years. Nice girl, but we brought out the worst in each other. Every day was a struggle, you know. When we finally split up, I felt like I could breathe again. "How did you know Sophia was different?" "Easy," he said with a smile. "She made me want to be a better person instead of making me feel like I wasn't good enough." Big difference. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the lunch crowd bustle past the cafe windows. Coconut Grove was one of my favorite parts of Miami. Artistic, laid back, with a sense of community that was often missing in the more upscale neighborhoods. "There's something else," Carlos said eventually. "Sophia didn't want me to tell you this, but David's been calling the house. Looking for you." My stomach tightened. "What kind of calls?" "At first, just asking how you were doing, if you were okay. But yesterday—" He hesitated. "Yesterday, he seemed angry. Wanted to know if you were seeing someone else." "I'm not," I said automatically. "I know, but he seemed convinced you were. Sophia told him to stop calling, but he's not the type to listen to reason when he's upset," I finished. "I know." After Carlos left, I sat in the cafe for another hour, staring at the divorce papers but not really seeing them. The legal process was supposed to bring closure, but it felt like it was just prolonging the inevitable. David wasn't ready to let go, and I was beginning to realize that my freedom might come at a higher price than I'd anticipated. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. This isn't over. D." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. But the unease remained. That evening, I was at Mom's house, helping her prepare dinner for the Sunday family gathering that had become our new tradition. The kitchen smelled like sofrito and roasted garlic, and salsa music played softly in the background. It was exactly the kind of peaceful domesticity that had been missing from my life for years. "You seem troubled, Mija," Mom said, looking up from the plantains she was frying. "David's been calling people. Looking for me." She set down her spatula and gave me her full attention. "What kind of calling?" "The kind that makes me think he's not handling this divorce as well as he pretended to be." Are you afraid of him? It was a question I'd been avoiding asking myself. Was I afraid of David, the man who'd been my husband for 5 years, who'd held me when I cried, who'd once driven 4 hours to surprise me with tickets to see my favorite band? I don't know, I said honestly. I don't think he'd hurt me physically, but emotionally, I think he's capable of making my life very difficult. Mom was quiet for a moment, stirring the rice with slow, deliberate movements. You know, when your father left, I was terrified. Not of him, but of being alone, of starting over, of not being strong enough to handle everything by myself. But you did handle it. I did, and you know what I learned? Sometimes the thing you're most afraid of is actually the thing that will save you. Before I could ask what she meant, the front door opened and the rest of the family began arriving. Sophia and Carlos with their kids, Miguel and his girlfriend, my aunts and uncles, even Carmen, who'd driven down from Orlando for the weekend. As we gathered around the dining room table, I felt the familiar warmth of being surrounded by people who loved me unconditionally. The conversation flowed from work to politics to gossip about neighbors, punctuated by laughter and the occasional argument about whether the Miami Heat had a chance at the playoffs. To new beginnings, Miguel said, raising his beer bottle in a toast. To new beginnings, everyone echoed, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace exactly, but a sense of possibility. Later that night, as I was driving home to my small apartment in Coconut Grove, I thought about what Mom had said. Maybe she was right. Maybe the thing I was most afraid of, being alone, starting over, building a life without David, was actually the thing that would save me. My phone rang as I was pulling into my parking space. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but as I walked up the stairs to my apartment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Excited about tomorrow. About the coffee shop and Jessica's pastelitos. About the yoga class I'd signed up for. About the possibility of meeting someone new. Or maybe just about the possibility of rediscovering who I was when I wasn't walking on eggshells. The divorce papers were still on my kitchen table, but they no longer felt like a burden. They felt like a doorway, and for the first time in years, I was ready to walk through it.